Welcome to Expat Equation, the podcast where we explore the human side of working abroad.
We're your hosts. I'm Julian Johns.
And I'm Bianca Chenan. We're both expats and inclusion professionals, and through our work at Candidate Aid and Culture Flow, we've helped hundreds of internationals navigate global careers.
In each episode, we speak with internationals and the companies who hire them to uncover the real stories, struggles, and strategies behind building a life and career across borders.
Today's guest is Vidhi Kumar, co-founder and CGO of Cardboard.
So we'll hear about her journey moving abroad across Singapore, Dubai, and now Norway.
We learn about her search for a role and what it taught her about navigating culture and identity and how it's shaping her career.
So whether you're an international professional or someone working in HR, this episode is for you.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, follow us wherever you're getting your podcast and share it with someone who might need to hear this.
Let's dive in. Hi, Vidhi, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Julian and Bianca. It's lovely to see you guys in person. And so I basically am one of the co-founders at Cardboard and also looking after growth. So as the Chief Growth Officer, my job basically involves figuring out where we are getting traction in the business, what channels are giving us the most traction, and then just doubling down, making it a lot more efficient to acquire customers.
Amazing. Maybe you can start by telling us all your international journey, where you're from, what inspired you to move abroad, study abroad as well, and how that shaped your professional path so far.
I moved to Norway about 8 years ago, and that's because my husband got transferred here. So I said, okay, looks like a cool country. I didn't realize it was a cold country, But after coming here, it's been quite a journey. And before coming here, I worked in India for about 10 years. I essentially started my professional career with L'Oreal in India, launching international products in India, but also trying to find local sort of niches that we could sort of build products for. And that was a really cool experience to work with people in APAC, people in Europe, and sort of see the differences in thinking, and also trying to explain Indian culture to them and make them realize how diverse India really is, just so they knew that there are 26 ways to say hello. I did my sort of majors in bachelor's in advertising. Then I decided to specialize in marketing and did my MBA in that. So getting a company like L'Oreal as my first one was really cool. But then I wanted to sort of explore different industries. So I moved into publishing with a children's magazine that I had read as a kid. And they got acquired by a tech company that wanted to turn all that content, which was analog, into like digital content. That was my first startup experience, I would say. I learned my first lesson, which is no matter how good your idea, you need to have funds. And we ran out of funds. So I had to move.
That's a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, that was pretty hard. You're young, you have all these dreams and you're like, oh, okay, now we don't have money. And then I moved into financial services because I figured let's follow the money. And from there, I moved within the group. So it was part of the Hinduja group, that company. So I moved within the group to Ashok Leyland, which was, I think it's the 4th largest bus maker in the world. And number 13 in trucks. So really huge company in India. And I think there we were 15,000 employees. And then I decided I wanted to explore Europe or the West. And I thought, okay, it's time to, do it now. So when we were looking at countries and we went through like a whole bunch of things, because it had to be a place where I could work, where it would be good for kids, where my husband obviously would have a job because I'm assuming he would go first and then I would have to follow. So we had like this Excel sheet of countries and pros and cons and where do we go and, visa requirements and ratings of happiness index and all of that. I know Amazing. It was as corny as that. But we looked at a lot of sort of metrics to decide where to go. And the reason we figured out Norway was really good is we spoke to a few people and they said it's a good place for kids. And, my son was a year and a half old at the time. So I was really keen that I pick a country where he has a really good childhood. And so Norway kind of really won out on that, plus also the work-life balance. And I was really overworked. I was like a workaholic. So I joke with people here, but I didn't have any hobbies, basically. I just worked all the time.
It's a very common story. People who are essentially have a high work ethic, or is it workaholic? They come here and they suddenly realize they've got nothing to talk about.
I am very curious to understand more about the experience of you moving abroad, because you have been living in different parts of India. You have been studying in Singapore, in Dubai, and then afterwards you moved to Norway. I'm very curious to know how the decision-making process went also for the studying part, and what was the biggest cultural shift or surprise that you experienced in each place.
That's very interesting. I think for me, I like to explore cultures and I love meeting different people. I'm born and raised in Mumbai, which itself is such a big culture pot. I had friends who were from different regions of India, right? Like there's Banarsi sari, which is like comes from a certain place in India, and there's a Bengali sari, and then there is Chennai and the south also has amazing vegetarian food, which to me was like, from the north, we don't really have that much variety in veg. But then when I went to Dubai and Singapore, those were like at a different level altogether when it came to consumerism. I mean, we'd seen it in Mumbai, but like Singapore and Dubai are at a different level. So as a student of marketing, it was very fascinating to see how global brands are selling in these countries. So when I go to a new country, I like to sort of also observe ads. I know my colleagues find me weird. They're like, you still see ads? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I see every ad.
I love ads.
Also. Yes. But that's kind of like my job, so I'm a bit biased. But I think what I saw in common in all these, at least in the Asian side of the world, is there's a lot of ambition and there's a lot of speed. And I think there's a lot of hope and optimism. People used to ask me, how are people in India so happy? And I'm like, I don't really know. We don't get stressed that much, frankly.
Yeah.
I think it's just tomorrow's a new day. That's the kind of mindset.
We talked about looking at advertising as a way to analyze the culture. One of our podcast guests, Alison, who's CMO at Active State, said exactly the same thing, that as an American moving to Europe, one of her key things was to understand how do they communicate, how was the language being used differently, because her as a marketing officer has to go in and try and appeal to this new market with the same product that they're selling extremely well in the US. And so it's great to hear how both of you are approaching culture as in this wonderfully analytic way, but also it's an expression of how people are making decisions, right? So it's a really interesting way of taking a view at culture and people.
I mean, any kind of ads, films, music, literature. When I was studying French, I'm such a huge fan of French cinema that I just saw, I'm like, this is a completely different perspective. And when I was learning German, I was listening to like the German rock scene. I couldn't understand the words, but it's just like the music sounded so different. And when I came to Norway, I actually found out, okay, like who are the people you listen to? And yeah, that's kind of like how I connected with
Norwegian rap.
Yeah, I actually I don't know if it is Norwegian rap, but the singer Tobias Sten. I love his music. And I think he sings in Nynorsk.
Yeah, he does.
Because I can't understand all of it, but it just sounds so good. I have it on repeat.
Yeah.
It's great to know that you and your partner made this decision with a lot of data, a lot of information. And clearly you had, at the forefront was your children's welfare. But also, you knew you needed a job to get here, and so your partner got a job, and then you followed. Discuss what was it like searching for your role here in Norway? What were the steps you took? How frustrating was it, or how easy was it?
It's funny, but I started looking before I came, right? And so I started looking at the kinds of jobs I would like to do, reaching out to people. And, some of them were really nice and said, oh, okay, cool to see you're moving. Reach out to me when you get here. And then they were too busy when I did actually get here. But that's fine. But you know what? That's okay. And but that made me feel really like, oh, this looks like a nice place. People are so friendly to reach out. But the other thing I also did was a little bit of research on companies that I could add value to, because I knew that coming with an international perspective, I would like to work with companies who are trying to go international, and then trying to find those companies. That was a bit of an exercise, but and I was like, no, you know what? I'll do whatever it takes. I'll drive Uber if I have to, but I am going to be employed because I've been financially independent since the day I started working. And, for a person who is financially independent, to go and say, oh, now I depend on someone else's income, that's not happening. Just mentally in my head, that was not possible. So I was pretty confident that even if I don't get a job in the first few months, I can drive a taxi. It's okay.
So you're clearly well educated amazing experience, you felt it was possible to go from all of that to being a taxi driver.
Yeah.
Because the most important thing was, A, to be financially independent.
Yes.
But to be here in Norway with your partner and do something.
Yes, I think because we decided to move as a family, I was clear that I want to continue being a financial contributor to the family, whatever it took.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends whose parents were entrepreneurs, and they actually made their money not in the corporate world, but candle business, jewelry business, catering. There are so many businesses out there.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so. There's an element there that you already knew that while there's a risk, there's going to be a path.
Yeah, and I know I work goddamn hard. So whatever it takes, I will work really hard.
It's interesting how your take was, how can I work for companies that want to be international? How did you get to that decision of saying, actually, I want to work for companies who are going to work internationally as a way to get in?
I think also because we use a fair bit of data, I realized that it's only 5 million people here. So if you look at, I come from a country of 1.2 billion, right? So already that's too small. So I knew that if I have to work at a scale that I was used to working, it has to at least be Europe, if not the US. So I needed companies that, I know I'm saying I'm needed, but it would be nice to have companies that have the same ambition. I genuinely believe that Norway should be your test market, but not your end market. And when you think international from the get-go, that just goes into the way you build the product from the beginning, rather than trying to force fit it later.
I'm very curious in terms of job hunting. How did it go? You said that you approached some people. They said, yes, let me know when you come here. Then they got busy. What happened afterwards? You came here. How did it go? How did you manage to get interviews? What worked for you and what didn't?
Yeah. So as usual, I started making a list. And then I had a list of every company that I wanted to work for, but also like companies that were hiring. I started making that list, and I think it was like 200 plus companies. And I had like columns of people I've reached out to, email sent, when is the next follow-up, just to make sure I felt like I needed to have control over the process, even though I was jobless at the time. I felt like, okay, I needed to have a system and a plan so I don't drive myself crazy. And when you hear like 200 no's, it's like quite demotivating, right? But when you feel like, okay, that's fine, it's just a line on an Excel sheet, it's fine. We move to the next line, we move to the next line, we move to the next line.
That's a fantastic strategy to deal with rejection.
Yeah.
So 200 no's, was that a reality for you?
Yeah. It was, and it's not even actual no's, it's just like you apply now, tomorrow they say, thank you for applying, but you don't qualify. It's like, it's just auto. So it's quite a dehumanizing process, I would say. But then I realized that maybe I'm just targeting the wrong companies, because I realized maybe they want to hire a certain kind of profile, and being in marketing and not speaking Norwegian, maybe I am disqualified because I don't speak fluent Norwegian, right? You can't do that in the first month. Actually, then I started looking at startups and companies in different spaces. And there I have to say it was really interesting talking to people, going up to see what they're building, and they had the same drive and ambition to make an impact, right? So that's how I got sort of my first job. I moved around August, September, after I finished my project back in India, and I started working by November. Because that was a part-time job, I still kept applying. So it was a blockchain startup.
So startups became that focus for you. You're now working at Cardboard.
Which is also a startup.
And the startup community here is quite tiny. How did you navigate your way around from that role at a blockchain company, which is super exciting, and then to Cardboard?
I read up a lot on blockchain. That's the first thing. I was quite interested in Bitcoin, and I found specifically there were like 5 blockchain companies at the time. I'm talking about 2017. I just started reaching out to the founders. Not a lot of people replied, but that was okay. But there were 2 companies that replied, took a meeting. I found them quite interesting as people, and I think they saw something in me as a person as well. So one of them just wanted me to join and help them, because the blockchain community is quite international. Right. So I worked with the team, and we applied for the first e-money license here for a crypto company. So that was really interesting. And I realized, wow, a lot of things can happen. So, when people tell me Norway is slow or, there isn't enough ambition, I'm like, I don't know what Norway you're talking to, but every person, like the world I've lived in the last 8 years, it's like very ambitious people everywhere. So, come join startups. This is where the ambition is.
I mean, I'd love to hear the energy coming through because I think Norway has that. Mm-hmm. But if you look at it from the outside and they 8 till 4 and they have their work-life balance, you go, well, where's the ambition? Well, actually, that's not how you define ambition. So we'll get into that later. So you're now co-founder at Cardboard. Explain that story.
So I was actually CMO at my previous company. And around the same time, I met Lars Cisse, who was CEO at Wanda at the time. And he's also chairman at Cardboard. So at the time, it was called Vibaco. We are building some things. You should come and meet the guys. And that's how I actually met them. So that's the thing with Norway, right? And it's so small that if you do enough good work, people notice, they want to reach out and have coffee chats. And it's funny because I don't have coffee, actually. So a lot of these are water chats for me.
Somebody told me, I think it must have been here for about 2 years, magic happens at 5 years. Either you stay and things work, or you decide, you know what, I've given it a shot and they end up going home. Does that ring true for you?
Interesting. Maybe it was 5 years. Probably. I felt like I had done a lot of things. I had been in the country for a while. But I also kind of felt like I needed to do something of my own. And so the natural question was, do I go back to India and start? Because India has a booming startup scene as well. Or I built something in Norway. And I think I was just debating at the time. I wasn't 100% sure. But I started looking at Antler. I started looking at Charge Incubator. I started doing a lot of research into Innovation Norway and stuff like that. And it just seemed to me that there are a couple of very good things for Norway that I liked. One is that my kids like it here and they refuse to move. But it's very easy to start a business. Everything is so clean, accessible. There is minimal bureaucracy in you actually doing stuff. I know Norway gets a lot of flack for the tax, but it's one of those few countries, and maybe it's true for the Nordics, but I'll speak for Norway, but people don't mind paying tax at all. People like it. People think it's a good thing to pay tax. Having said that, Norway is also at a nice place geographically, I think. Yes, if you like skiing and all of that, but I don't mean from that perspective. I mean more from, it's quite close to the US, it's quite close to the UK. We really need better flights. So if somebody is listening, please give better flights to Oslo. But it's close to Europe. It's also not that far away from the Middle East, for example, right? And it's also not that stressful to live here in terms of, your daily life. Frankly, it's you have to do a lot of work yourself, of course. There's no help and all of that. But it's not that stressful from a day-to-day perspective. The trains do work. Public transport is amazing. My father was here last month and, before he came here, he used to be like, why are you taking public transport everywhere? I'm like, you come here and you will see. It is so neat. Everything is so nice that you actually want to use public transport, right? So I felt that maybe we should do it in Norway and then scale to Europe and the West. It becomes easier to scale to the West from here. So that's one of the reasons why I started. Sorry, that was a long answer to the question, but there were different layers.
No, I think it's great. We get to hear the richness, and having that continuous story is fantastic. So,
okay.
Yeah, and this is great.
In terms of work culture, I'm very curious to know, how do you define it here in Norway and how different is from what you have experienced before?
So each country has sort of its own flavor, right? Work culture in Singapore is different from Dubai, is different from Mumbai, is different from Chennai. So each of these, the local sort of culture also influences the work culture. What I genuinely like about Norway is the work-life balance, because you are not your job only, right? There are so many facets. I had a friend of mine who explained it to me, which I just loved. It's jigsaw puzzles, right? Everything is a piece that fits in together. So I think in Norway, the pieces have the opportunity to fit well together, whether it's your family, and people appreciate that. Dugnad is a thing, volunteering is a thing, you show up, which makes it nice and a lot more human, where you get to meet people one-on-one. And since there are fewer people here, every person counts, right? Which is amazing. So I think what Norway has is a genuinely human approach to work culture, which I think a lot of companies could learn from. A lot of countries also could learn from.
I agree. Considering that you said yourself earlier that you are kind of a workaholic, and I'm in the same situation. So I'm very curious how it went for you. Was it hard to adapt? Or
in the beginning it was. I actually had one of my Norwegian sort of bosses sit me down one day and say, du må slappe av. You have to relax. And, I'm like, what? Are you serious? Yeah, it's okay. So that's why I joke, I had to get a hobby because I had nothing else to talk about. And, you don't want to sit with someone who's only talking about work all the time, right? So, yeah.
On that conversation, isn't it interesting to hear other people who've not quite gone through that process? And you sit with them and you hear them talk about their job and their job and their job. And then you go, gosh, is there nothing else to you? And then you go, hold on, I was that person 5 years ago.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's amazing when you...
I was telling my husband this just a few days ago. It's just I was working with a few people and I came home and I was telling him, I have become Norwegian. Like, I wanted to know the person. It isn't just about the job. Like, what is it?
Yeah.
Who are they?
Yeah.
And he's like, he was laughing. He's like, you have changed.
Yes.
If you had to choose one thing about adapting to work culture here, what was the most difficult, apart from, you mentioned work-life balance, was there anything else that was difficult for you in terms of hierarchies or no hierarchy, flat structures, honesty, transparency? What was difficult?
For me, it was weird because people didn't know that much about India and Indian culture, which, yeah, obviously, right? You live in a place and you think everyone knows it. And like we are in so many sitcoms and you think, okay, yeah, people get it, but people didn't. And people tend to have some biases sometimes based on who they've worked with. So knowingly or unknowingly, they kind of project that on you. Like one of the things is, hierarchies, like maybe you're hierarchical. And I'm like, I've been in so many different cultures, like it doesn't matter to me, So I don't believe in hierarchies. And I think in that sense, I never really conformed to that view. But people thought because you're an Indian, maybe you have it. And I think that's just unfair. Like you have to come to India seriously and work across the country to realize it's like a melting pot of cultures.
Such a great answer.
Yes.
Such a great answer.
In terms of language, do you feel that after you moved here, not knowing the language right away, blockage or kind of held you back?
So when I came here, I was very keen on learning Norwegian. So straight off the bat, anybody who would talk to me, I'd be like, I'm going to Folkeuniversitet. I'm learning. It's happening. I try and use it, maybe if it wasn't good either. But sometimes I get in my own head and I'm like debating the grammar and like the moment has passed. So I'm getting better at that. But Norwegian is my 7th language. So I was very committed to learning the language. And if I move tomorrow to Sweden, I will make the effort to learn Swedish. Because languages are like your windows to the culture, right? And I love people. I love culture. I want to understand how is it that over the last, 5,000 years, people have evolved in this way, in this part. And that's amazing. So I was very committed to language. I do understand some people were not able to look beyond it, but that's okay. I found people who were able to look beyond it and were fine with my broken Norwegian. And I did have people tell me sometimes, oh, you sound so funny in Norwegian. And I'm like, that's okay. I sound funny in many languages.
It sounds as though you have a very good sense of self, by the way. One of the things we talk about is you've got to be quite strong to make a decision to move abroad and to deal with not just the new job, but also there's everything that goes around that. Have you always been like this, or has being in Norway made you even more resilient somehow?
I think moving out of my comfort zone of India, I kind of had mentally decided that it is going to be hard. That's just how it is. And so I was kind of prepared, and no matter how hard it got, it would surprise me like, oh my gosh, I thought it was going to be hard, but this is harder than hard. But then it's kind of like you have to coach yourself, right? And it wasn't, there were moments where I felt like, I just break down and cry. I'm like, this is too much. I think I'm fighting too hard. But then, you sleep it off and tomorrow is a new day. And then you just keep going. And I think having kids really made a big difference. I think if I had moved alone, it would have been harder. But, watching my son play in talk Norwegian and then play, you're like, they're doing it, right? It's okay. And they're happy. And like, if he's happy and my daughter is happy, I feel happy. So I think that having that family and that community is very important to make you look forward to the next day.
Yeah. Amazing.
I love it.
Yeah.
When you think about hiring internationals, what do you wish that HR or hiring managers should understand better about hiring them? And also, what are you doing differently at Cardboard?
It's a very interesting question. what I wish people would do differently is, if you're hiring someone, there's this, debate between culture add versus culture fit. And I understand that mindset. It's natural. It's how humankind has evolved, right? Forming those groups and tribes. But what I think, if people want to challenge themselves a little bit and bring different perspectives into their work culture, they have to educate themselves what that means. So if you want to hire for diversity, I would actively recommend HR people actually travel to Asia, to Africa, to the rest of the world, of course, so you can really empathize with the kind of people that you're hiring. And the other thing I would say is, when you're bringing someone on board, they are a completely different human being, right? So they could add a perspective or contribute in a way that maybe your existing team just wouldn't have thought of. So why don't you encourage that? Instead of trying to get everyone to fit into a box, encourage that individuality. That's what Norway is amazing at, right? Like, you as an individual matter. The children here are taught from a very young age to be independent, that their opinions matter. Addumo bistemme, like, you can decide. So why does that go out of the window when you hire adults?
That's a very good question.
It's a great question. Yeah.
Sorry, what was the other part? Maybe I missed it.
What is Cardboard doing differently?
Oh, so what Cardboard is, what we are attempting to do differently is challenge ourselves a bit. When you create a company in the beginning, when it's just a slide deck, sometimes it's easy to default to your own connections. It's easy to default to people who are like you, who know you. But if you take me, I'm completely different from the guys on the team, right? We didn't have anything in common except Lars Sisse connecting us. But once he did, we were so online with the mission and the passion with what we wanted to solve, the sort of software subscriptions chaos problem, that we connected. And then I also realized each one of them, of course, they're all Norwegian guys, but they're so different from each other. Each one of them is their own person and brings something different to the table. So if you look beyond, the white male sort of definition, they are individuals who have different points of view. So what we're trying to do is hire people for different thinking. We're trying to bring individuals on board. We don't look at gender, we don't look at race or anything like that. We look at you as a person, what drives you. And today we have a product that you can actually sell, right? So of course, what do you want to join the team for? And so we're trying to build a culture where it's not this alpha in your face kind of culture. It's more zen. In a way that you come here and you do your work, and you do it in a way that makes you feel fulfilled. And we all drive towards the same goal, in a sense. So we're trying to build a culture where people who have ambition, people who have that drive, who want to go out there and prove themselves and really go for like the best, be the best version of themselves, will find a place in Cardboard to be that.
Amazing. We will go now through a quick fire round. So we will have a few short questions, and please try to keep the answers as short as possible. But if you feel like adding some extra information, that's also fine. First one, best thing about working abroad?
Work-life balance.
Most awkward cultural moment?
Do all Indians speak Indian? No, they do not. We have 26 languages and over 1,000 dialects. So we are a complex country.
What's one local tradition you love here?
Dugnat, the volunteering culture.
Remote, hybrid or office?
Office. I think that's where you build culture, really, the face-to-face time. It is different.
Coffee or tea or something else?
Water.
What is your superpower?
Reading.
Okay, I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Can you recommend a great book on India that can help people look at India differently? I've just finished reading Shantaram, which I really love. Is there a great book on India that you could recommend to our listeners?
There are so many, and I love so many writers. It's like trying to pick your favorite child. Which book do I pick? But so I'll give a book which is more from the Indian market perspective. And there's an author called Rama Bijapurkar. She is really amazing at sort of breaking down the Indian consumer mindset, which makes it easier for people from outside to understand how do you sell in India, but also how you build products for India. And she has she has a series of books, but there's one that's called We Are Like That Only. Because that's how we talk in India. We are like that only. So that's what her book is called, which is amazing.
Thank you.
No, sir.
We're now going to go into a bit of a deep dive, but these are about reflections and advice, tips and tricks you can give people who are just starting their expat journey. So, especially to someone who has a partner who already has a job in Norway, is there any advice you can give, like tips and tricks you can give?
Again, I'm going to go back to books because I think it's the first thing is to get the right mindset. If you are clear that it is going to be hard, then if it becomes easy, it's a bonus, right? So just assume it's going to be hard. And when I started with my growth journey, for example, I read this book called The Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck, which is seriously amazing. But there's another book by Mel Robbins called The Let Them Theory, which I would highly recommend. Let them reject you. It's totally fine. Let them say no. It's totally fine. And I think that book really opened up a lot of my apprehensions, where sometimes I would take things personally, but then I was like, you know what? It's okay. Let them. That's fine. And be organized. I think having like a system makes you feel like you're already working. You're working to find a job. So you are kind of employed, just not paid.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What you actually mentioned earlier with the Excel file, and then you don't take things so personally. If you could give an advice to businesses here, what would you say are the advantages of hiring internationals into a company and also into a team?
That's a good one. I'm going to take a different view on that one. I don't think companies should hire internationals for the heck of it or because they have a quota to fit. Nobody's going to be happy with that. Why don't you start by thinking international and thinking how you could really build global businesses out of Norway? It was surprising to me after the Innovation Norway talk where I said my ambition was to build businesses in Norway and take it to the world, where somebody came up and told me that, oh, we didn't think of that because we were only thinking of selling in Norway. And I'm like, look to Sweden. That's literally what they do. Look to Denmark. They have been doing it. And I genuinely believe Norway has an unfair advantage. It should use to its own advantage, which is the oil money. That money is there. And at the end of the day, any business person knows money makes money. So figure out how that money can be deployed into your people to help them build businesses. Of course, social welfare is great. Of course, a good, well-functioning public sector is great. But what about the rest of the population that wants to build businesses? Are we going to tell them, no, you should not? That would just go against everything Norway stands for, which is you are devaluing the human that wants to build a business. So I would sincerely request the oil fund, and they're probably doing it, is how do you build entrepreneurship as a skill in Norway? How do you encourage it? How do you give them capital, funding, coaching, training to build global businesses out of Norway? And internationals would just naturally fit into that makeup. You don't have to force fit them.
I love it.
Excellent. I'm not sure I want to ask the other two questions now. They're going to that. I'd like to go to the one on belonging. If that's all right.
Ooh, that's a nice one.
With all your experience and travels and journeys, you have a young family in Norway, great careers in studying. What does belonging mean to you now, and how has that changed?
So for me, belonging, and when I first heard this word, I wasn't exactly sure what it meant, but then you clarified before. And to me, I feel like I've always belonged to books. So I've never felt like an outsider because as long as the city has a library and a bookstore, I'm fine. And I do this every city I travel to. It's weird. I know, but I just walk into a bookstore. Right? You do too? That's amazing. I walk into a bookstore. I take my kids into the bookstore and I'm like, oh my God, look at what books are on display. And that just tells you so much about the local culture. I just buy a book. People think I'm like old school, like, do you read physical books? And I'm like, heck yeah. I consume books in any format, whether it's audio books, physical books, e-books. Tomorrow if they have 3D experiential books, I will explore that too. So if you're building something like that, please find me.
Or maybe you will start developing it.
Have a side hustle.
Thank you very much, Vidhi, for sharing your story on building a career and a life across borders.
To everyone listening, we hope that her experience has reminded you that you're not alone and that navigating life abroad is as much about community as it is about courage.
And if you're an international professional looking for support or working in HR wanting to improve how your company hires and supports global talent,
you'll find links to candidate aid and culture flow in the show notes. We would love to support your journey.
Don't forget to subscribe and share with someone who might need to hear this.
This is the Expat Equation, exploring the human side of working abroad. powered by Candidate Aid and Culture Flow. Vidhi, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me, Julian and
Thank
Bianca.
you.
Lovely to meet you both.
Thank you, and we'll see you all next time.
See you next time.